All right, so I'm going to jump in and show you guys a little bit of the experience that we created here for Dunder Mifflin, or the journey map we created for Dunder Mifflin within the Mural application. So here you have our Mural application. Within here, you can design steps. So we kind of put our workflow in here to help reinforce that workflow. And then the first step is about creating the user personas. So very simple. We put the names, we put the goals in here. We also assign them the color at this point. So we assign a color of a note card, and then as we start getting into the storytelling portion, we use those same colors to represent who is taking that action at that time. From there, and you can see this down here at the bottom, we basically start with the kind of the beginning and end of the story, and we may have multiple ones. I'll kind of assign this one to Joe and this to Mary, and I'll say, go ahead and you fill out your story. And as these people are filling out their stories in this screen, I'll basically, as a facilitator, start moving some of them up into stories that we want to capture. So in that process, like I said, we're going to be consolidating stories. We're going to be breaking stories apart. We're going to elaborate on some. One I wanted to highlight here, just an example. This is where obviously we have opening the portal and adding to a cart and checking out. That's a typical, e-commerce experience that we would expect, and then I can envision. But also this is a great time to explore futuristic things. Like, what if I had an IoT device that automatically notified Dunder Mifflin when I was out of paper, and then I just got an email about that order, and then I could, and just approve it, and then I can receive updates and receive the product. So very, very hands-off approach. But if I can't tell it in a story like this, then I can't build it, right? So let's start with this, tell it as a story, and then you have this option to compare, like, hey, do we want this story or do we want something like this story? And gives the team an opportunity to have a conversation about that stuff. So once we've broken out all those stories, we take them and we break them out into a linear flow up here. So as we do the feature brainstorming, you see we've broken out all the stories here into this linear flow, and we've added a gray card on the top here, and this represents the journey name. So we try to provide a name for each of these journeys, but sometimes we don't know. Sometimes, sometimes we'll just leave these as a question mark, and we'll discuss with the team. Hey, what do we think this should be called? And then we can work through what that's called. During this portion of it, though, the idea is to take these steps and start filling in what happens, right? So when you're checking out, I need to enter my shipping information. I need to enter my billing information. I need to confirm. So these are all all details of this step, and hopefully we'll start to kind of visualize a little bit of what this application might have, and you can start to look at the types of items that might be on this screen. Once we have all these the features laid out within this feature brainstorming session, we move on to our last one, which is feature prioritization. And you can see here in this example, the team basically prioritizes the basic creating an order checkout process and then the fulfillment of an order. So this idea, phase one of the application, we just want to be able to get an order out. So that's the goal for the team. And then the second phase is where we look at maybe having a public launch. And then everything else down there we just put as post MVP, which we're gonna get to later. Not that important. So kind of parking lot items in a way even as well. All right. So those are the 4 steps that we go down. If I flip back over here to the slides, that essentially results in our story map. And the reason we call it a story map is because we're basically taking this story up top, this journey. And we're mapping it down to these lower level stories. So we're mapping the one story all the way down to the very end and to the lower level details. While we went all the way down to the end here, it is important to kind of focus in on these portions of the story up here on the top, right? These stories that we originally said, that's what we want to present later. But we don't want to present this right now because we don't necessarily have the designs yet. We want to make sure we have something visual to help make our story more of a picture book in a way. So that comes to the next step, which is kind of designing the experience. Now we have a large team of designers within our company, but the idea here is, we still are going to look at clients and understand what are their goals for designing. Obviously, we can design something custom right out of the gate, and it can be, the most impressive thing at all. But in the modern day of designing applications, there are a lot of shortcuts that you can take, and they're all, and I shouldn't even call them shortcuts because they're all very helpful, and they're going to save you a ton of time. If your goal is to just be very simple, you really don't have much, you're really not looking for anything fancy. If it's, an internal tool that, you have few users on, then we recommend using a template or using some sort of an existing design system and just kind of running with it. If you have a little bit of if you have some sort of brand guidelines within your company, or we have user preferences, the idea there is that you have some sort of an existing application that you're like, oh, you know what, just build it like our other portal, right? Those sort of things are very helpful. You can just create a design system around there and then build your new app based on those guidelines of that design system. And with the new tools like Sketch, it's very easy to ultimately, form that up. The third option there is to pick a public design system, something that's available in the public. There's a number of them out there. We primarily use either Bootstrap or Material, but we recommend, there's plenty out there. I recommend you take a look. But then you customize them. Most of them have recommendations or techniques around how you customize the templates or the design systems. And you can easily apply some branding without looking at this as a whole custom design effort. And then lastly is custom design. We have a ton of clients that prefer that. It really helps kind of set a name for you if that's the case. And there's a number of other techniques that we use to get at the custom design. So just need to understand the goals of before you get started designing any of these experiences. The next tip is to progressively increase the fidelity of your design. So typically when we look at that first experience and we look at the story, we try to set out to tell the story in the simplest form possible. So that might just be paper sketch, although that's actually fading away because the wireframe tools are so nice. But we don't wireframe everything to the fullest level. So we have a kind of a level in between here before the wireframe, which we call a component map. And really we're just looking at high level, honestly correlated very closely to the index cards that we have in the story map, what is going to be on that screen. And then from there, after we have a full experience laid out in the component map form, then we go back as a second pass and we start formalizing either wireframe or high fidelity design based on the story that we want to tell. So if we want to be telling the checkout experience to the customers, then that's where we're going to focus our efforts on high fidelity design. We still believe in Agile, and we're still an Agile company. So it's important, that we don't design the full application because then that's going to be waterfall. We want to design as few screens as possible. And so our mechanism for prioritizing those screens is basically related to that story map, where we look at what story do we want to tell in the end here, and those are where we're going to focus our efforts. We use our typical process right now is using a tool called Sketch. We use that with Envision. Sketch, that's very similar to kind of Photoshop. What that allows you to do, though, and why it's a little bit better, is it just hooks in a lot better to the development workflow. It has mechanisms for you to drag and drop buttons and change labels of buttons very easily, as well as anything within a design system that we can create. The Envision app is an online prototyping tool, an online clickable prototyping tool that allows you to publish your designs in a public forum or out to users and to people in the company so that they can see them and actually click on them and interact with them, even though they're not running in real software. And then Craft is a plugin that we use within Sketch to kind of promote that out into the Envision prototype tool.